When news of his arrest arrived, I was the least surprised. My mother outright denied the statement, simply refused even the suggestion that my father could commit such a heinous crime as the one detailed by the reporting officer. My brother, 2 years younger and more inclined to my way of thinking, regarded the news as something that had been expected. My very young, vacant-minded sister failed to grasp the severity of the crimes and simply took the announcement as something generally bad. The circumstances from which my father would assuredly free himself, as his made-up heroes had done during their father-daughter story time. He was being held without bail at the jailhouse about a 20-minute drive from our home, and at the demand of our mother, we all loaded up into the family SUV and drove to meet our intern dad. He sat alone in a spacious cell, presumably used to house multiple criminals in one room, though our town wasn't known for criminality or anything really, and looked very upset. His dark blue jeans had various cuts in the fabric as if torn by fingernails, something my mother pretended not to notice. His black sweater had at some point been splattered by something, and since I didn't remember him leaving the home in the morning with any stains, I assumed they were obtained during his alleged criminal act. His skin, which had been almost orange from the unyielding summer sun, was now unbelievably pale, as if he had been dipped in white paint and left to dry somewhere cold and lightless. Black hair, previously combed back, now sat in a downward-felled mess covering his forehead and his right eye. He didn't seem to mind the obstruction of vision. The officer who had led us to his cell said we had 10 minutes to speak with our father, and that due to the nature of my father's crime, he would have to remain in the corridor to supervise. We don't have a family lawyer, we've never needed one, and the suggestion of an attorney's presence was either unheard or ignored by my distraught mother. My sister, finally realizing the realness of the situation, ran to my father and hugged him. He didn't seem to notice her embrace nor our gathering in the room. He just stared at the floor, eyes set deep in his face, encircled by darkness born of tiredness or fright, while his mouth hung open and breathless. That's what unnerved me most. In the large, quiet room where in any other city several prisoners would be held, but in this one only our father resided, you could hear even the smallest sound. I heard my mother's unstable, ragged breathing, my brother's deep, self-calming respiration, and my sister's heavy gulps of air between her sobs. My own breathing was as steady as I could keep it, but no exhalations could be heard from my father. He just sat there as motionless as a cadaver, staring into oblivion or gazing upon some remembered horror. When it became obvious that my father would not respond to our questions, of which there were many, even from myself and my brother, we left him alone and returned to the officer, who escorted us upstairs and into the lobby of the station. In another city, the building would have seemed underfunded, the officers ill-equipped to handle even a slow day's worth of crime, but in our town, the police openly expressed themselves to be bored out of their minds. Some even jokingly wished for an uptick in crime, but I highly doubt the charges laid against my father were what those sentinels of peace had in mind. They laid out the full details, and due to my father's lack of cooperation, hadn't felt the need to spare us the grislier aspects. They were furious with him, absolutely disgusted by what had transpired, and I realized that the suggestion of lawyering up was merely an admonishment of formality. They wanted my father locked up, or perhaps even dead. When all had been said and my mother had been given time to process what she had been told, we drove home in silence. During the ride, my sister stared out the window and pointed at random objects, mouthing imperceptible things to herself. Her child's mind wouldn't be able to fathom what she had overheard during our briefing at the station. My brother stared down at his hands, which rested palms down on his thighs, his face hard, unmoving. He was old enough to comprehend the things suggested, implied, and fully revealed. I could not see my mother's face, but I'm sure it was of similar visage to my brother's, though probably masked to some degree by what she thought was a comforting, everything'll be alright smile. My face was blank. I didn't need to come to terms with anything, and I had no difficulty in believing that my father could commit the atrocities of which he has been accused. I was aware of my father's predilection for violence. 6 days ago, a girl had gone missing. Her name was Kelly. The local news reported that she had wandered off from her short walk to school with friends after something in the woods caught her attention. The 2 girls with whom she had been walking did not follow her, even called out to her to return to the sidewalk, but she ignored them. They ran to school and told the staff, who ran into the woods, and when they could not find her, called the police, who dispatched several officers to assist in the search. After an hour with no success, the town was alerted to the situation and a full search party convened and dispersed throughout the woods and outlying neighborhoods. Today, after yet another unsuccessful morning search, a man walked into the police station holding a large bag. The man knelt in the lobby of the station, cradling the bag, eyes fixated on nothing in particular, but aimed at the general direction of the officers. They approached the man, asked what he held, and when he did not respond, they opened it. Their reactions were what you'd expect them to be. After the immediate shock wore off, they issued somber pats on the back of my father, who still had not spoken. They initially thought that in some gravely fortuitous lone man search, he had recovered the body of the missing girl. It was only when an officer noticed my father's hands and torn jeans that the atmosphere of the room dramatically shifted. Guns were raised and leveled at my father, orders were barked aloud and into radios, and the gloom-befallen room was thrown into chaos. My father had, a tale reconstructed to the best accuracy possible given the evidence, abducted the girl during her sojourn into the woods, bisected her at the hips, hidden the lower half, and returned the upper portion of the station. The lower half, which was found in the rarely used freezer we keep in our basement, had been preserved for a hideous purpose. Apparently, the girl had been slain on the last day of her abduction, and my father had spent the previous few days behaving as if he had not been holding her captive somewhere. Where, we never found out. Why he kept her for so long before committing a secondary crime, we don't know. Some people believe the whole thing was some prolonged episode of insanity, making the largely uneducated assumption that years of heavy drinking had warped his mind, while others think it was the first of what would have been many murderous indulgences born of some genetic predisposition for savagery. My brother took offense at that, despite not having any knowledge to disprove the assertion. He was only 11, and the seed of evil could very be within him. I think that upset him more than the actual murder, the chance that he could one day carry out a similar act of diabolism. My birthday is in 2 days. Remember how I said I could very well believe my father had done such terrible things? Last year on my birthday, my father was late to my birthday party. He and my mother argued, and in my desire to have a birthday not ruined by fighting, I tried to break up the argument. My obviously drunk father pushed me, and I fell down our stairs, fracturing my spine. I was rendered permanently handicapped. My mother, hoping to preserve the family unit, reported the incident as an accident, that I had fallen while excitedly running up the stairs to retrieve a present. I didn't deny the story, only because I wanted to believe it was just an accident, that he hadn't truly meant to push me with such force. Whether my father's recent actions were born of immense guilt, or the sick joke of a twisted mind, I can't say, because I don't know. He won't speak to anyone, and from what I've heard during my mother's phone calls with authorities, he won't be allowed back to civilization for quite some time, if ever. We plan on moving soon. I don't know if it'll be another small town, but I don't think it'll matter anymore. Even the smallest, most remote place can have crimes as awful as those in any big city. What keeps me up at night, what sends a chill through my inoperative spine, is the note that was attached to one of the poor girl's legs. It read, "Melissa, I'm sorry for what happened last year. Please forgive me. I got you some new legs, just your size. I know they're not exactly the same. Hers are a bit less toned, but it was the best I could do. I mean, she just stumbled into the woods while I was on my walk. I didn't even call out to her or anything. I hadn't thought of what to get you for your birthday that could make up for what I did last year, and those legs. Those legs! I just knew they'd be perfect for you. Please, Melissa, understand? From Dad."
A few months ago, my best friend Jeremy called and asked if he could come over. He told me about this crazy new side of the internet that he had found. I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. He was always up to something mischievous, though. Even as an adult, he still had the enthusiasm of a child when he became excited. Because of that, it was always hard to tell him no. I could tell that this seemed important to him, so I told him to just come over and show me what the hell he was talking about. He came over to my house later that same day. He showed up with a flash drive. He was so excited, he didn't even take off his shoes. He ran over to my already open laptop that was sitting on my living room table and immediately plugged the flash drive in. He had that obnoxious smile across his face. It was the smile he made when we were kids. The same taunting grin he made right before we were about to do something our parents would be furious about. So much for saying hello. You really should knock first. What if I was naked? My voice was playful. Shut up and come sit down. Oh, and I'm sorry for just barging in like that, he said just as playfully. Whatever. You're definitely not sorry. I'm going to go make us some tea, and I'll be right out. I smiled as I walked away. Around 10 minutes later, I came back in with 2 mugs full of freshly brewed tea. I sat the tea down on the table in front of my couch and sat down next to Jeremy. I looked over at my laptop. My eyes immediately fixated on the screen. The flash drive contained a whole different operating system. I watched my laptop boot up and start running an operating system I had never even seen before. My eyes then shot their gaze at Jeremy. What the hell is this? Is this going to mess up my computer? You know I can't afford another one if this breaks. Most importantly, I need it for school. All of my schoolwork is on here. You. My voice was sharp, but before I could finish talking, he cut me off. You worry too much. Just relax. I tested it out on my computer and everything went fine. Just wait for it to boot up. Your computer will return to normal once I power it down and remove the flash drive. His voice had a reassuring tone. Yeah, whatever, fine, I said reluctantly. After about 10 more minutes of us just sitting there watching this foreign operating system load, it finally finished. The home screen was a solid shade of blue, and there were only 2 icons. One was a web browser. The other one was some sort of VPN. In the corner was a search bar. I tried typing all kinds of words in it, but nothing came up. Eventually, after I was done clicking around, Jeremy took over the controls. He opened up a web browser. It was a search engine I had never seen before. Actually, it was a search engine I had never even heard of. I watched him manically type in random numbers and letters into the search engine. Before I could even ask what he was doing, he hit enter and a Wikipedia page came up. Towards the middle of the page was a list of links. They all had different names. The credit card company, Guns Are Great, and the one-stop shop were names of some of the links. Most links had extremely illegal titles and definitely led to illegal activities. Some of them were just downright disgusting and disturbing. I'd rather not go into detail about those links. Jeremy quickly identified what he was looking for. It was a link called the Gore Store. He was always into that kind of stuff. I never understood why. Gore was just fascinating to him. I myself could not say the same. It had to have been fake anyways, right? I just wanted to get it over with, so I sat quietly and waited for the page to load. Once it loaded, my screen was filled with obscene image of mutilated bodies. There were videos of different people getting killed in different ways. It was insanely graphic. He showed me 2 30-second clips before I had to run to the bathroom. I could hear Jeremy's laughter as I viciously gagged over my toilet. When I came out of the bathroom, the Gore page was gone and he was back on the Wikipedia page. I watched his eyes dart around the screen. It looked like he was trying to find something particular. Before I could ask what he was doing, he let out an aha. What is it? I'm not sure if this whole dark web thing is for me. Maybe we should just turn it off. What? Before I could even finish my sentence, he cut me off again. Look what I found. It's pretty cool. I think you'll actually like it, he said confidently. I reluctantly agreed and sat back down on the couch beside him. The computer cursor was hovered over a link simply named Eyes. I was convinced it was about to be the most nauseating thing in the world. I pictured dangling eyeballs or blood-filled eye sockets. It had to be something along those lines. He could tell I was unprepared, and he immediately clicked the button after I gave a slight nod of approval. I was not expecting what I saw. They were eyes, all right, normal eyes. It looked like a business page for selling contacts. It appeared professional, and there was nothing strange about it, except for the fact that the seemingly normal business page was on the dark web. I had a look through their selection and ended up asking Jeremy to buy me a pair. He already had the correct form of currency in some sort of account. He thought it was funny, of course, and bought them without a second thought. I thanked him, and we talked about what they were going to look like. We were both excited. After Jeremy left that night, he took the flash drive with him. He explained that he was going away on a business trip and wouldn't be back for a week or two. He said that he sent the package directly to my house, but to call him if there was any delivery issues. The estimated arrival date was 3 weeks from that time anyways. I figured he would be back by then. That way, we could experience unboxing them and me struggling to put them in together. He did find the website and pay for them after all. 2 days later, I was surprised when I opened my front door to get the mail and saw a package at my front door. I quickly got my mail and took the package inside. I remember thinking these couldn't be the contacts. It was way too early. I grabbed a box cutter from the kitchen and started to slice open the package. There they were. The bright green contacts that had a slight blue fade were in that little box. They were beautiful. I know I told Jeremy that I would wait, but I was too excited. I took them out of the box and soaked them in the contact solution that came with the package. I looked in the mirror at my dark brown eyes while the contacts sat in the solution. I smiled at the fact that my eyes were about to be a completely different color, even if it was only temporary. I always wanted brighter eyes. I never put in contacts before, so I expected it to be quite tricky for my first try. To my surprise, I put both of them in with quite ease. It's safe to say I gave myself a pat on the back. I was thoroughly impressed. It was like I had been doing it all my life. They slid right into place and didn't budge or slide at all. After looking in the mirror for who knows how long, I decided to call Jeremy and tell him about it. He didn't answer. I figured he was probably working and he would eventually call me back. When he didn't pick up, I looked back into the mirror, stunned by my new eye color. I started taking pictures to update my social platforms. My self-esteem skyrocketed. When I was done obsessing over my new contacts, I decided I should probably make dinner. I lived by myself, and I always made way too much food. I'd used the leftovers for lunch, so it never really went to waste. That night, I decided to make a whole lasagna. It was one of my favorite meals, and I figured I could give some to my elderly neighbor as well. I put a pot of water on the stove to bring it to a boil. As I was pulling out the noodles, something caught my eye. It was like a quick shadow flew by my peripheral vision. I stopped and looked around, but I saw nothing. I remember thinking it was strange, but not uncommon. I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. I finished prepping and lined the cooked noodles on a sheet of aluminum foil. I opened up a package of raw meat to cook in an already hot pan. As I went to open the meat, I glanced over at the noodles. This time I was looking straight at them. A wave of horror washed over my face. The noodles had turned into maggots. They were squirming all over the aluminum foil. I watched as some of them wiggled themselves off of the counter. Each time one hit the ground, I flinched. They were big. They were about as big as the top part of a pointer finger. I grabbed the broom and the garage can and swept them all into the garbage. I took it outside to the garbage bin immediately. After that, I had completely lost my appetite. I decided I needed to take a bath to try and calm down and recollect my thoughts. I made some tea, lit some candles, and filled the bathtub. I slowly got into the bath as the hot water touched my skin. It was quiet and peaceful. I finally had time to think. I closed my eyes and let my head rest against the back of the tub. What just happened? I'm definitely not seeing things. Those maggots were real. How in the world did my freshly boiled noodles turn into maggots? It doesn't make sense. I whispered my thoughts aloud. When I opened my eyes to gaze at the relaxing setup I had put together, I jumped out of the water. The bath water was a deep shade of red now, and every candle I had lit had went out. I quickly wrapped myself in a towel and turned the main light on. The candles weren't lit, but the water was clear again. I didn't care. I wasn't going back in there. I dried myself off and put on fresh clothes. I went back to the bathroom to brush my teeth and hair before bed. I turned on the sink and grabbed my toothbrush. Right before I started brushing my teeth, I looked up into the mirror. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I was holding the toothbrush in my mouth, but my reflection wasn't. I watched my reflection sway back and forth. The closer I leaned in, the farther my reflection would back up. It giggled as I watched my own reflection tear out my eyeballs. My reflection's eyes were dangling so low that they touched its mouth. It licked one of the eyeballs, and one of the contacts flipped on its tongue. It started to chew it like it was food. Each chew sounded like a broken piece of plastic. I watched blood start to fall from my reflection's eyes. I couldn't take any more. I washed out my mouth and ran back into my bedroom. I sat down at my vanity and tried to take out the contacts without looking into the mirror. I thought they'd be easy to remove since they were so easy to put in. I was wrong. No matter what I did, they wouldn't budge, not even a little bit. I tried pinching it, moving it, pushing and sliding it. Nothing. After 30 minutes of nothing but severely irritating my eye, I gave up. I straightened my neck from my bent-over position and looked in my vanity mirror. My reflection was laughing at me. I covered all of the mirrors in my house until I could figure out some way to get these things out of my eyes. They were a pretty natural color, so if I went out in public, nobody would even notice I had contacts stuck in my eyes. I was also skeptical to call a doctor at the time, considering I received these contacts from the dark web. I decided to try and rationalize things. I realized I sure didn't want to sleep with them in, so I'd have to stay awake as long as possible until I found a solution. I went into my living room to watch TV. It was the only place in the house where I couldn't see myself in some way. My house looked slightly abandoned. I had blankets draped over anything that could cause a reflection. I leaned forward to grab the remote, which had fallen on the floor. Upon picking it up, I felt a sharp pain throughout my entire hand. I immediately dropped the remote and looked at my aching palm. Every inch of my hand was riddled in cuts. I watched the blood drip from my hand onto the floor. I looked down to find the remote on the ground still. The buttons stuck out and came to a sharp point. They were sharper than a newly opened razor. I kicked the remote as hard as I could. I heard it crash against the wall and hit the floor. With my head in hands, I heard the television turn on. It was playing a show I couldn't recognize. I lifted my head and looked towards the television. It was me. I was on my own television. The quality was grainy, but I could make out what was happening. The television showed me walking across the street from the local grocery store. On my way across the road, a huge truck came at full speed. In the blink of an eye, the truck hit me, and I watched my lifeless body drag against the sidewalk. Then it turned back off. I didn't know what to do. I was scrambling around trying to figure something out. I ended up calling Jeremy. He seemed a bit confused, and honestly, it didn't even sound like he believed me. It's like he thought I was joking around. He ended up just hanging up on me, thinking I was pranking him. When I hung up my phone, I slammed it down on my hallway door. I have been sitting here ever since the television situation. Tears filled my eyes as I heard my phone vibrate against the wooden floor. I picked up my phone and saw it was a text message from an unknown number. "Go outside," is all it read. I tried calling the number back. Of course, that didn't work. Considering there was no number to begin with, the caller ID just said unknown. At this point, I was trying everything. What more did I have to lose? I walked past my kitchen and glanced over at the bowl of fruit I kept on the counter. They were all black and rotten. I didn't stop though. I just wanted to make it to my front door. I didn't plan on actually fully going outside, but a peek wouldn't hurt. At least that's what I thought. Before I could put my hand on the doorknob, someone started knocking. "Package delivery." The voice was deep and foreign. I opened up my door just a tad, and there stood the delivery man. His eyes were wide, really wide. They looked dry, like he hadn't blinked in hours. He had slash wounds across his entire face and down his neck. He was incredibly lanky and tall. He reached out his arms to me to hand me the package, and I realized he was missing 6 fingers. The wounds looked incredibly fresh, Blood soiled the entire box. "Just leave it, I'll get it," I said quickly. I slammed the door in his face and locked every single door in my house that led to the outside. Once I was sure he was gone, I quickly grabbed the package and pulled it in the house. Everything around me was slowly decaying, even the people outside. I eventually made my way back to my room. My stairs were now littered with nails sticking directly upwards. I tried to avoid as many as I could, but I still stabbed the bottom of my feet multiple times. There were countless bloody holes in my feet. I left a crimson trail wherever I walked. I walked into the bathroom that was connected to the bedroom once more. I pulled off the cover and looked at myself again. This time, my reflection was still laughing, but pieces of flesh dangled from different areas of my face. My neck was snapped, and I had a noose around my neck. My tongue salivated black-looking tar, and my eyes were now completely hollowed out. I haven't slept in 3 days. I'm afraid to go to sleep. What if I wake up and my entire house is embedded in barbed wire? What if my floor is completely made out of shards of glass? What if everything around me turns into an ultimate death trap? I'm absolutely terrified. I'm not taking any chances, especially since I brought the box inside. I ended up opening it. There was another box inside. This box was slightly cleaner, but had a message scratched along the top. It was barely legible, but it read, "Open to find out when your untimely demise will fall upon you. Clock's ticking." Again, I figured I had nothing to lose, so I opened the second box. This time the box contained a handwritten note. "Not all eyes are meant to be a prize. The contacts you contain will show you the other side. You can live with this vision or choose your demise. I left you a gift, now you can decide." I've been sitting here for hours now. All of my food is maggot-infested and moldy. I need to go to the grocery store, but I keep looking at the gift that sat below the note. I never really thought this would be an appropriate gift for anyone, but I can't help but gaze at this already tied noose. I knew going on the dark web was a bad idea.
I think you were grinding your teeth again last night. My boyfriend places coffee for me on our kitchen table. It's cold this morning and I wrap my hands around the mug. Eek! That's so weird. I can't tell that I'm doing it. How can you tell? It's like a clicking noise, like chattering. He passes me cream from the fridge. It's kind of rhythmic too. I say it's grinding because I'm not sure how else to describe it. It's like you're knocking your teeth together. He holds his mouth open and drops it closed. It's like nails on a chalkboard, and I shudder. Ugh, that is so strange. I'm going to have to tape my mouth shut or something. He gives me a side hug. "I still love you," he says with a wink. He sits down, pulling out his phone to read the news. This is our morning routine, the same one we've had for the past year of living together. I wonder if it's my retainer or something, I continue. Maybe I need it adjusted, or it's bothering me in my sleep. I do actually feel like my jaw has been a bit tight lately, or something. Could be. You could always call your doctor. Orthodontist, I correct. I haven't been to one in years, though. I mean, I got my braces off all the way back in middle school. That night, I stare at my teeth before brushing. I notice that I have some enamel wear. I've always had it worse than most. My dentist tells me it's because I have an overbite, but now I wonder if I've been grinding my teeth my whole life, too. My boyfriend is a heavy sleeper, so the fact that he's been hearing my teeth knocking means that it must be super loud. It gives me the creeps to think that I'm doing it unconsciously. I look at the transparent edges on my 2 front teeth. I try teeth whitening, but I feel like it almost made the enamel wear stand out more. I brush, trying not to hyperfocus my anxiety on my image in the mirror. The next morning, my mouth is noticeably sore. My jaw feels like I've been chewing on gum for hours. My teeth feel ginger to the touch. Something is super wrong, I tell my boyfriend. I am wincing even just opening my mouth to drink my coffee. "I'm sorry, babe. Definitely call the doctor." I call my dentist and ask if they have a recommendation for an orthodontist. The office can't see me for another 2 days, but at least I have an appointment scheduled. They recommend I remove my retainer at night until I can come in. Sometimes retainers can shift over time, the office assistant tells me. It can be anything from it getting knocked around to exposure to hot temperatures to biting down on it too much. It's possible that it just needs a bit of readjustment. But we'll still want to look at you to make sure nothing else is at play. I thank her. It makes sense. I don't think I've had my retainer adjusted in 10 years. That night, I gasped to see that my teeth look different. The enamel wear is significantly worse than it has ever been. I'm near tears. I start looking up the cost of dental caps online. It's expensive and I feel sick with anxiety. It's not that bad, my boyfriend says, looking at my mouth. You're probably just stressed. Maybe you'll feel better in the morning not wearing your retainer. The next morning, I am no longer in pain. Relief floods through me. I roll over, but my boyfriend is not in bed. This isn't terribly abnormal, as he is an early riser. Good morning, I grumpily mumble as I make my way to the kitchen, but there is nothing. I head to the bathroom, wondering if he is taking out the trash or something. I freeze. There is dark red smeared around my mouth. The room smells of iron. I realize with horror that it must be blood. I realize that I am stuffed, completely and utterly full, as if I have just eaten a feast. I feel the gurgle in my belly. I open my mouth. A little clump of hair juts out of my sharp razor-like teeth in the back of my mouth. I call my dad. Oh shit. How long ago did you last see the orthodontist? My dad asks on the other line. I don't know, maybe a decade? Damn it. You're supposed to go in every 10 years or the suppression wears off. Lesson learned, I guess. Anything left of him? No, I say, sobs starting to build on my chest. Okay, good. It's better that way. Don't worry about it. Let me call my guy. They've handled these types of emergencies before. How long will it take my teeth to go back to normal? Now that you've fed, they'll retract in about 24 to 48 hours. But we'll want to have your retainer looked at just in case. And make sure to mark your calendar or something for this time 9 years from now. We don't want this happening twice. I cough, shooting out one of my boyfriend's glasses lenses. I crunch it between my back teeth, swallowing it again. Definitely not. At 21 years old and 5.5 feet tall, I weighed 300 pounds. This meant I carried with me about 150 pounds of extra body weight, and it was, according to the doctors, slowly killing me. My doctors prescribed a strict diet and exercise routine, which was a problem because I binge eat as a way to deal with anxiety, and I was a naturally anxious person. I dropped out of school that year and decided to focus on my body, but the real reason I wanted to get in shape was David. David was a classmate of mine. At the top of his class, he was smart and kind. When I saw him for the first time, my heart skipped a beat. I sat next to him, and while the others would make nasty comments about me, he was always kind. When I dropped out, he was the only one to reach out and ask if I was okay. We texted often, but now that I think about it, I was always the one who initiated our conversations. One day, after the first month of my sabbatical, I finally gathered up the nerve to ask him out. He rejected me, obviously. He implicitly let me know that he didn't want me texting him again. He was polite, but I understood the message. As part of my recovery, I had to go to the gym, and although I was no longer enrolled in school, I still had access to an on-campus gym that was frequented by the students. I felt horrible walking in. I felt everyone stare at me. It was like being at the center of a carnival freak show. And that's when I saw him. He left a kettlebell on the station and turned to grab a bottle of water. A girl approached him, almost no fat in her, huge breasts, and her butt looked incredible in those skin-tight leggings. Not to mention her face was gorgeous, a picture of perfection. I thought she may have been an instructor, but then she was in his arms and they were kissing. A gorgeous couple. I tried to keep to myself, but David noticed me and waved hi. I waved back and she saw it. She came to my treadmill with 2 more girls and they started harassing me. She was like a territorial animal, and when she realized who I was, she turned to the offensive. Surely David had mentioned our texting. They started making fun of me, publicly, and everyone around started laughing at me. I was crying. I looked at David to try and get him to intervene, but his girlfriend told me to stop staring at her man. Then one of her friends made me trip as I walked on the treadmill, and I went face first into the ground. The band of the treadmill pulled me back and I was shot to the floor. I rolled around it, causing the entire gym to burst out laughing. I ran out the door in tears. This event sent me into a depressive episode that I saw no way of recovering from. I came to learn her name was Alexandra, and she was a freshman at the university. It had been 6 months since then, and the ghost of the humiliation I suffered followed me everywhere. I was on my way back from McDonald's. I carried with me half a dozen burgers and sodas and fries. The guy at the counter thought I was going to a party, but these were only for me. On my way home, I walked down a dark street. I would have usually taken the main street, but there had been new developments in the area, and it was under construction. I'd never been in the alley before, but it was a shortcut and it was more peaceful. That's when I saw the sign. It was a cosmetics place of sorts. It was dingy and ugly, but the man sitting at the front desk had a kind face. I kept walking, but he called out to me, and I turned around. He offered me a chance, and we talked for a long while about my experience at the gym, about seeing how everyone else was so much more beautiful than me, and about how I wanted to be like that girl from the gym. I wanted to replace her, to destroy her. The doctor smiled and said, "There is nothing that my scalpel cannot fix." I should have turned away, but I stayed. The surgeries were long and complicated. The doctor was cheap, cheaper than anyone should be, but it was all I could afford. Most of the surgeries were made to remove fat and readjust the skin. It was better than working out at the gym. Then the face surgeries came a few months later. Eternal sessions of pain. The anesthetic never quite worked, and I was trapped under the blade for hours on end, trying not to scream as the doctor smiled with evil glee. By the time the doctor was finally done with me, after my 13th plastic surgery, I looked in the mirror and I was happy to see I had completely transformed myself. I was no longer the sad, lonely loser I'd always known. I had become Alexandra. The resemblance was uncanny. I felt powerful, strong. It was time for me to make a move on David, but how was I to replace her? I grabbed my backpack and loaded it with the necessary tools. I followed her outside her gym. I saw David, gorgeous as ever, getting into his car and driving away. Alexandra got on her bicycle and rode away. I was behind her, far enough away that she wouldn't hear me. She took a corner, and I ran through the woods to intercept her. This was the street where it was supposed to happen. It was a dark road with no houses, connected to the forest. I intercepted her, and she fell from her bike. When she saw me, she had this confused look on her face. Confusion gave way to a sort of amusement, and she began to laugh. "Oh my God, it's you!" She recognized me. How would she recognize me? "Look at yourself, piggy. No matter what you do, you'll never be like me." She mocked me, making pig sounds. As if it were a sword, I pulled a pipe from my bag. She immediately stopped laughing. "What the hell?" she tried to ask, but I descended on her, straddling her like a horse and beating her face with the pipe. She cried out in pain, howled, and begged for mercy as I beat her down. Once I could no longer hear her screams, I stopped. The day after I went straight to the gym. I wore Alexandra's skimpiest outfit, and many people at the gym said, "Hi, Alex," as they passed me by. I got to David and I wrapped my arms around his neck. We kissed. It was everything I ever wanted. Soft but rich and lovely. I could feel his love for me, his warmth, but when we separated and he saw me, he was shocked. "You?" he asked. He started to ask where was his girlfriend, but I was sure I was Alex. Why would he say that to me? People were turning around, and before I knew it, I was screaming madly in tremendous pain. I grew angry at the world, at the people I knew, at myself, but above all else, angry at David, at his constant rejection. I took one of the dumbbells and ran at him, smashing it in his face. It's been 10 years since. The people at the asylum won't let me go. They say I am still a danger to others. They tell me David survived, although he needed about as much plastic surgery as me in order to fix the damage. I still resent them for not accepting my identity. I was never that fat loser girl. Alexandra is not dead, and I never killed anyone. Because I am Alexandra. I am Alexandra. I am Alexandra. I was working at the police station when I checked the local newspaper. The headline immediately caught my attention. Patients went missing from the hospital. The article mentioned that a few patients who were close to dying went missing, and nobody knows what happened to them. The first case was recorded 2 months ago, and the most recent one happened yesterday. The nurses can't find them. All of them were dying, so they couldn't escape the hospital. My wife also worked there, so I called her. Yeah, we have no idea what happened to them, she said. We've checked every corner of the buildings. I got home around 7 p.m. My wife was already home. She usually got home a few hours before me. As I was looking for lunch, she came upstairs from the basement. What were you doing down there? I asked. I put some old broken chairs there, she responded. I'll probably renovate the whole basement soon. Why? I raised my eyebrows. Since we moved there, we hadn't used the basement. It was strange. There was nothing interesting down there, just a few spiders. Why not? I had no better thing to do. I finally agreed. The following day I went to work again. We've got a call from the hospital to go there and investigate the missing persons because their families want answers to what happened to them. I drove there with Mark, another police officer. Dr. Martin, one of the doctors, told us every information about the missing patients. He even showed us where we could find their beds. It was in the same room my wife worked in. She was home at the time. She didn't work on Fridays. It seems like all the patients were really close to the hospital's back door, Mark said to Dr. Martin and me. What if they escaped there? Impossible. Dr. Martin shook his head. All of them were on their final days. They couldn't walk, and we hadn't found any strange footprints leading out the back door. There's also the whole parking lot. Somebody would have seen it if they escaped there. What if someone smuggled them out, I theorized. It seems like all the missing patients were close to the back door. Someone could drag them to the parking lot and drop them in the car. But who? Dr. Martin asked. It was a fair question. Who could have done that, and why? I have no idea, I responded. My wife also works here and hadn't noticed anything strange. We will speak to the staff here next week, Mark said. Make sure that everyone will be here. After that, we went back to the police station to write some reports, then spoke about it to our boss. I arrived home at the usual time, but didn't find my wife. I heard strange noises from the basement and wanted to go down there. But then she came upstairs. Hi, she greeted me. So, are you working on that basement? I asked. She looked strange. I thought I saw a small amount of blood on her face. Do you need any help? No, I can do it alone. Are you sure? I can help. I'll be home the whole weekend anyway. Thanks, but I'll handle it. What are you doing anyway there? We don't need that basement that much. Stop asking me so many questions, she shouted at me frustrated. I was surprised. Sorry, I'm tired. Look, just don't go down there, please, she said in a calmer tone, then went to sleep. The following day quickly went by. She was in the basement almost all the time, and I was reading some books. She then told me she was going to the market to buy some food. After she left the house, I came out of my room and went to the basement door. It was strange, as I still heard some noises coming from below. I was curious. I opened the door and looked down the stairs. I only saw darkness, so I used my phone to illuminate the narrow walls. I slowly walked down the stairs. The noises were getting louder. After about 20 steps, I arrived there. I immediately regretted it. There were some steel cages inside, and in every cage there was something. Something I can't even name. Old, rotten bodies. Some of them looked like the missing persons from the hospital. I froze, as I couldn't know what to do, and the worst wasn't the fact that the bodies were there. They were moving. Their eyes were white. One of them grabbed the cell's door with his rotten hand. I finally ran back to the stairs, trying to get out of there as soon as possible. At the top of the stairs, there was my wife standing with angry eyes. I told you not to go there, she said slowly. What the hell are you doing down there? I shouted at her. What are those things? These are the patients that went missing. I'm going to be the greatest scientist ever known, she responded. Her voice was confident. I felt like I didn't know her. I stopped death itself. I saved those patients from death. I had no idea what to do, so I just tried to run out of there, pushing her aside, but as I was trying to push her away, she bit my finger. I screamed because of the pain, but tried to run out anyway. I looked down at my hand and one of my fingers was missing. I ran up to the bathroom, then locked the door behind me. Don't hide from me, she shouted from outside. You should be proud of me. I'll save humanity. As she was shouting, I found some bandages to stop the bleeding from my finger. She kicked the door multiple times, then stabbed it with a kitchen knife. My only chance was to escape out the window. I opened it, then crawled outside. The only problem was that the bathroom was on the floor. I had to jump. The pain in my legs was horrible as I fell to the ground. I immediately called Mark to get to my house in his car. He then took me to the hospital to patch me up. The following day, I told them and the police what happened. "Yeah, we figured there was something wrong," Mark said. "Your house burned down last night just after I brought you to the hospital. The firefighters found the bodies you were talking about, but your wife is missing. We have no idea where she is."
Before I start, I feel like I should let something be very clear. I absolutely love Ellen. We've been living together for about 3 years now, but have known each other our whole lives. In fact, we were childhood friends. And I know this may sound like a fairy tale to some people, but it truly felt like we were always destined to be together. Even after graduation, when we started dating other people, it only felt truly right when we were with each other. So I don't know what took me so long to ask her out, but I'm really glad I did. We have the same taste in music, movies, and even food. We laugh at the same dumb jokes and know exactly how to comfort each other in times of need. She's the kindest, most gentle, and loving girl I ever met. We even been talking about our plans for marriage and how we would like to have kids of our own. That's why it hurts so much how it all went terribly wrong in just 4 nights. I would also like to preface that Ellen doesn't have much of a family other than me, and some very distant aunts that she never met and doesn't even know their names. I was born in a big family with 4 siblings and plenty of cousins that were always visiting and even helping out when we got in trouble. Ellen has none of that. She doesn't have any siblings, and her father was an alcoholic, abusive freak that died when she was young. Her mother was a very kind and inspiring person that took care of the family by herself for many years and almost a second mother to myself. So when she passed away last year, it hurt us both for a long time. But Ellen stayed strong. She's not the type to let her feelings easily surface, so you gotta be a lot more perceptive to get what she truly feels. I used to pride myself in being capable of that. I felt like I knew her better than I knew myself. That's why this is all so strange and, frankly, terrifying. We were sleeping in bed and I was dreaming. I don't really remember what it was about, but for some reason I'm sure of it until I heard her voice very close to my ear. Knock, 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 knock. She was caressing my hair gently while sitting in bed and looking below at me. I slowly opened my eyes, groggy from sleep. "Hey, what is it, baby?" She kept looking at me, fixated, and repeated, "Knock, knock, knock, knock." I glanced at the digital clock on top of the dresser. 3:27 a.m. I had work in only a few hours. "What is it, Ellen?" She paused. "Please answer the joke, dear." "Knock, knock, knock, knock." "Fine," I accepted, mostly because I was expecting some kind of surprise. Ellen wasn't the type to do what she was doing for no reason. "Who's there?" Her smile opened up and she answered, "Not me, so don't answer the door." I kept looking at her, dumbfounded. What was that supposed to mean? "Is that it? Is that the joke?" "Yes," she said, laying on the couch and covering herself with a blanket. "Thank you for answering." "Weirdo," I answered, closing my eyes and going back to sleep. Next morning, things went as usual. I only remembered the strange conversation while I was alone in the bathroom brushing my teeth, and wasn't sure if it had truly happened or if it was just a weird dream. So we had our breakfast together and she was acting normal, reading something aloud from a fashion magazine. Frankly, I wasn't paying much attention, so I took the opportunity to ask about last night. Initially, she didn't seem to know what I was talking about, then her eyes fixated on me and the same smile from last night crossed her face, briefly, and I knew it wasn't just a dream. She told me it wasn't anything of importance and stopped paying attention when I asked more inquisitively, and even though I shouldn't, I gave up. I had work and other matters to attend to and just brushed off the weird event thinking it wouldn't happen again. But the following night, I woke up to her voice. "Knock, knock." A pause. "Knock." "What is it now?" I said. "Ellen, what are you doing?" "Knock, knock, knock," she repeated. This time, she wasn't even touching me, just sitting in bed, looking at me with that same smile. But her eyes seemed larger and she blinked in longer intervals. I looked at the clock, once again, 3:27 a.m. "Ellen, come on, what is it? I got work in a few hours. Can't have the luxury of waking up in the middle of the night to answer knock-knock jokes." "Knock, knock, knock." This is getting creepy, you know. I'm not sure if this is some gag you've been doing, but I don't like it. "Answer it. Knock, knock, knock." I sighed, but also let a small laugh escape. It was creepy, of course, but she was also my Ellen, so it didn't bother me as much as it should. Fine, who is there? I answered in a playful tone. Not me, so don't answer the door. For some reason, I felt a chill down my spine. It was the same answer as before, and I still didn't get what it meant. But the way she said it, with a strange, monotone voice, contrasted well with her smile and the fact that I had no idea what she meant by that. What does that mean? I asked. I really don't get it. She just smiled and went back to sleep. I felt a throb in my heart, but did the same. Next day, we talked again about what was happening. She was very evasive with my questions, and I barely got her to say anything. It was almost as if she couldn't talk about it, which was very strange considering we talk about pretty much everything. I told her I needed to be well rested for work, something she should understand well, and wasn't liking her little gag every night. She just nodded, and I decided to not press further as I didn't want to hurt her feelings and had work to attend to. When I got back home, we had dinner, watched a movie, and went to bed. Knock. Knock. I opened my eyes faster this time around. In fact, I barely got any sleep. I just knew she would do it again and kept thinking about it the whole time. Glanced at the clock. 3:27 a.m. Knock. Knock. I thought about ignoring her, just pretending I was asleep and she wouldn't wake me up, so I closed my eyes slowly, hoping that she hadn't seen me opening them in the first place and stayed quiet. Knock. Knock, she continued. She didn't stop. I regulated my breathing, but she kept going. Knock. Knock. I'm not answering your joke, Ellen. Stop it. Knock. Knock. I ignored, but she kept going. She had never been this insistent with anything before. I tried to ignore it, but it was getting on my nerves, and frankly, I felt scared. Why was Ellen doing this? Why every night at the same exact time down to the minute? Why wouldn't she let me sleep until I answered her? Knock. Knock. I got up in a sudden movement. God damn it, Ellen! I was ready for a discussion, but when I finally glanced at her, it was as if all the strength was drained from me. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't blinking. Just staring right at me, fixated like an animal, and her mouth was moving slowly, and she didn't stop. Knock. Knock. I didn't know how to react or what expression I had when I saw her, but my heart skipped a beat. It was terrifying, as if her gaze froze me in place. 1,000-yard stare. Knock. Knock. Who's there? I asked, feeling as if it was the only way out of that nightmare. Not me. So don't answer the door, she said weakly. Ellen slowly closed her eyes and laid down. I kept staring at her while she fell into what seemed to be a deep sleep. I got up and left. I walked downstairs and sat down at the couch in the living room, staring at the night sky outside and absorbing the quiet of the neighborhood. My heart was beating fast and it didn't slow down. I was too scared to sleep in the same room as my girlfriend, all because of a knock-knock joke. But it was unnatural. I thought about calling someone. I thought about it all being some kind of sleep-related issue, such as some type of sleepwalking, but it didn't make any sense. I felt so tired and decided that early in the morning I would call an old friend who's a psychologist and get the opinion of a professional. Something was wrong with Ellen. I stayed on the couch as the day rose, and once Ellen woke up, she was acting normal again. Even asked me why I wasn't in bed. I didn't answer. In fact, I didn't speak to her and simply left for work. She seemed very upset, but I wouldn't do anything about it. Once I got to work, I called my friend, told him everything that was happening in as much detail as I'm describing now. He didn't seem as worried as I figured, but we agreed in making an appointment for next week. Now I just needed to convince Ellen to come with me. I received plenty of text messages from her. She seemed very worried, sad, and even confused. She apologized a lot, and it broke my heart a little. I felt bad. I shouldn't have, but I answered her and made her promise it wouldn't happen again. I also told her about the appointment, and she seemed reluctant but agreed to go with me. So we made up. This was Ellen, after all. The girl I knew ever since I was 6 years old. The woman I loved and that had taken care of me for years. And as much as that strange behavior creeped me out, She wasn't doing anything particularly frightening or even dangerous, so for a brief while I convinced myself I should give her another chance. When I returned home from work, we stayed together. She even prepared my favorite meal. Ellen was acting as gentle and caring as I always remembered, and I slept with her in our bedroom, even though I was still a bit reluctant. Knock. I couldn't believe it. She promised me she wouldn't. Knock. I gazed at the clock. 3:27 a.m. Always. Knock. I was laying on my stomach and I couldn't see her face. In fact, I didn't even bother to look at her. I was feeling more sad than scared at that point. Sad that she had broken her word. Knock. Who's there? I answered, determined to just go back to sleep. Not me. So don't answer the door. I stayed quiet and closed my eyes. I just hoped I would be able to handle it until the appointment next week. To my surprise, I was actually able to sleep. Probably because I hadn't been able to rest since last night. The following morning, I went back to not saying anything to Ellen, only very limited responses. I was expecting her to act the same as yesterday, trying to apologize, but she didn't. Mostly, she didn't say anything, almost as if she had accepted it. She also looked tired, or at least a bit weak. I went to work, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. Didn't receive any messages either. Once I got back, we had the most silent dinner I ever had in my life, and she barely ate anything. I decided to let her have the bedroom and sleep on the couch. I wasn't sure if it would stop her, but held on to the hope that she wouldn't go downstairs only to tell me the same knock-knock joke again. I covered myself with a blanket, shaked off that uneasy feeling, and tried to sleep. I had a deep sleep, without dreams. Felt like I was lost in darkness. Then I heard breathing. Opened my eyes to see Ellen standing above me, looking at me with big, fixated eyes and dilated pupils that didn't seem to belong in such a completely neutral expression, watching me sleep. I almost screamed in terror, jumped out of the couch, and her eyes followed me as I stumbled through the dark room, creating distance between us. For a moment, I was able to glance at the clock above the table. 3:27 a.m. Ellen, what are you doing? I asked, desperate, but she didn't move. In fact, she didn't say anything. Just stared at me as if I was made of glass and she could see right through me. Then, I heard a knock on the front door. Instinctively, I looked in that direction. It was followed by another knock and another, someone almost pounding at the door. I glanced back at Ellen and she was still staring at me. Slowly, I got closer to the door and she didn't move. The pounding continued. Who's there? I screamed. It stopped, and then I heard a voice. John? John, can you hear me? Open the door, please! John, please open the door! I froze in place. The voice kept calling me, but I couldn't believe it. It was Ellen's voice, coming from the other side of the door, but it couldn't be. I beg you, John, open the door. It's serious. She's not me. I swear, she's not me. Slowly, I turned my head to look at Ellen, standing in front of the couch. She was looking at me, the same fixated eyes, and a terrible, wide grin across her face. The pounding continued. John, open the door. Please, you have to trust me. I stayed still, not knowing what to do, and I don't remember what happened after that. I just woke up in my bedroom. The digital clock indicates it's 4:21 a.m. Ellen isn't by my side. I'm completely alone. I'm trembling uncontrollably, and I don't know what's going on. I don't remember what happened after I saw her terrible grin. I don't know if I opened the door. I tried to look for my phone, see if I could call the police or at least someone that I know, but I left it downstairs. All I have is Ellen's laptop, and it's where I'm writing this right now, to get advice, because I can't go downstairs. The corridor is dark, very dark, almost as if the shadows were leaning into the room, and I can hear a faint, scratching sound coming from below. What should I do?
I live alone and rent a one-story house in a suburban neighborhood in a tourist town. I am a biomedical equipment technician who works evenings at the local hospital. I am also an insomniac. Many express sympathy when I reveal my lifelong condition. They try to console me with suggestions of home remedies to cause drowsiness, which fail. What people do not realize is how positive I am about my perpetual and cursed wakefulness. I have many interests to fill in the extra free time. I often read or listen to old radio recordings. These hobbies keep me entertained late into the night while the rest of the world sleeps. I purchased a personal GPS drone. It cost me around $2,000 to further enhance my nocturnal hours. The price tag of the quadcopter was not as bad as it could have been. It was a complete impulse buy born from my love of aerial photography. I hoped to capture the scenic outdoor surroundings of my area in Northern California. I unboxed it as soon as I got home from Best Buy. I went out on my porch and opened it. One of my neighbors on his routine jog, Sam McKellar, saw me and waved. I responded with a wave myself and shifted my attention back to my new object. It was 16 pounds. It looked like an oversized Wi-Fi router with 4 propellers. A 4K HD camera was on its front. It came with options for control through the use of an app or the handheld remote the company provided. Some were suspicious of using their cell. This stemmed from concern about infiltration of corporations into our lives. I tossed those worries to the side and decided my iPhone was a fine device to manipulate my item. I went to work, but not before I calibrated the surroundings onto the drone. I went into my backyard after midnight once work was over. The drone was on the charger in the garage during the entirety of my shift. I placed it on the grass and perused some of the instructions with a pen light. It could reach an altitude of over 3,000 feet. I hit a switch to activate its night vision capacity before I made it hover in the air. Once I guided it above my property, I felt a certain excitement I had never experienced before. After all, I was about to see the place I lived in from a new vantage point. It resembled a mere box in a row of them dotted with verdant square lawns on the live feed. I glided it all over the neighborhood. Within 15 minutes, saw something alarming. Mr. and Miss McKellar lived a block away from me, and yet that night the man's old Honda was not in the driveway. He may have been away on business. I knew he was in sales and did have to travel on occasion. A teal truck pulled in front of the garage and parked. A young man with slicked back hair hopped out and went up to the door and knocked. The wife answered in a bathrobe. They embraced and he walked in. I had captured an act of infidelity, one of my neighbors no less, within the first half hour of owning the thing. They must have an open relationship, I reasoned. I made an effort to not get too involved in my own hypothetical scenarios. I shrugged off the incident and kept exploring the streets around me. I went to bed that night happy with my newfound activity. My lack of talent would never land me gigs as a full-time photographer. Still, I was happy to make it a normal part of my routine, a mild obsession to hack at the demon known as sleeplessness. Over the next few weeks, it would become what I would look forward to the most. I saw strange things one night. 4 pale individuals stood on the front lawn of a 4-story domicile in my neighborhood. They wore billowing white gowns which fluttered in the wind. Their mouths hung open. Curiosity got the better of me. I brought my device closer to them, a maneuver not recommended by most operators. An overt violation of privacy or blatant spying would cause the drone to get flagged. It would shut down per regulation set forth by the Federal Aviation Administration. They had many rules. I had to know who these people were and what they were doing out at such an unusual hour. Yes, I am aware of my hypocrisy in that regard. One of them had bloodstains on the front of his bone-white suit. When he saw the drone, they peered upwards at it in unison before they vanished. The group had degenerated faster than they appeared. This event may seem unusual to the layperson, but I had not slept in 6 days. Hallucinations via sleep deprivation psychosis is common in my life. I dismissed it as another unreal conjuring of my disorder. I will leave it up to you to agree with me or not. I sent the drone half a mile down past the highway and towards a museum. I saw a man stagger in its parking lot. At first, I thought he was a drunkard ejected from a recently closed bar across the street. On further inspection, I saw how his head hung to the side in an unnatural way. It was though his neck had snapped. He fell to the ground and dissipated before he could reach a winding sidewalk next to a library. On a bike trail behind the historical building stood another person. She held her arms above her head and sprinted towards the drone. Her feet lifted off the ground. Her body parts fell off one by one and vanished into a fleeting mist. I would have sworn I heard her shriek through my phone speaker. I decided it was time to retire for the night and try to go to bed. I knew slumber would elude me after my visual of these ethereal apparitions. I brought the drone back past the McKellar household. The stranger's truck parked there once more, and I knew Sam was not home again. The same young man with the slicked back hair walked out and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a cigarette and took a puff before he looked and saw the drone. I had it stay in one place a bit too long. The man went into his inner coat pocket and brought out a pistol. He aimed it at the camera and squeezed the trigger. I moved the drone out of the way, and the fact that he was a terrible shot helped. He was a bit inebriated or drowsy, which resulted in him missing. He fired 2 more times. I navigated the drone around different streets. I wanted to give it an unusual path in case he tried to follow it in his vehicle. Residents nearby did call the authorities after they heard the shots. A patrol vehicle came out and investigated the vicinity. No one knocked on my door, and I was not eager to get involved within the next 24 hours. Flying a drone above a vehicle or person was illegal. I did not want to get in trouble. Granted, I was above 400 feet. He did not have the legal right to shoot at my aircraft either within that range. I was not enthused about the idea of going to court and arguing over the technicalities. I could not even judge the man. My response very well may have been similar if I was him in that same circumstance. In retrospect, I wish I had told on him. It might have spared the both of us a lot of problems in the future. My own curiosity got the better of me in regards to the McKellar house. I had to check in on them during the flights. I got a thrill knowing I was the only person with the knowledge of their dirty business. One star-filled night in September, I navigated it past the McKellar house once more. The same teal truck parked in the driveway, and the man hopped out again. I had a good view of him as he walked into the abode after the woman opened the door. They kissed and moved out onto the porch for a few moments. He kicked the door behind him when they went inside as she unbuttoned his shirt. From the distance, I could still see their forms. They were silhouettes through the beige curtains hung on the foyer windows. I saw another pair of headlights illuminate the front of the house. It took me a while to grasp what I was seeing. It was a Honda, the husband's car near the residency. Mr. McKellar parked along the curb at first. He rolled his window down to take in the view of what was a strange and unfamiliar truck on his property. He drove the car behind the truck to make sure the man would not be able to flee. Sam McKellar stepped onto the concrete concourse which led to his house. He had a wrinkled gray business suit. He had a loose tie. He grabbed and yanked off as though it was a heavy burden. He tossed it into the bushes as he fumbled for his house keys and entered the threshold. Even from my elevation, I could see how he took careful steps to maintain silence. Sam went into the garage and walked out with items in both of his hands. In his right, he held an axe with the blade turned downwards. In his left, he had a canister of gasoline. He set both of these things down on the outdoor blanket at the foot of the door. He fumbled for his keys before he twisted the knob and learned it was already unlocked. He picked up the objects again. When he walked in, I moved the drone to the side of the house. I had an angle past a neighbor's brick chimney. Sam moved upstairs to their master bedroom. Their curtains were open. The couple made love as Sam barged in. He swung the flat side of the blade at the wife's face and knocked her out. As she slumped to the ground between the mattress and the nightstand, the other man tried to leap out of bed. He made a dash for the window and tried to jump out. Sam pursued him with 2 bounding steps. The blade sunk into the man's back as a jettison of blood soaked the front of Sam's shirt. He lifted the axe out again and heaved it into the man's spine before he twisted the handle. He reached behind him to grab the fuel and he doused the man in the flammable liquid. His wife came too. She stood and looked around dazed. She grabbed the lamp and swung it at Sam's face. A handful of cracked glass went into his mouth, eyes, and nose. He clawed at his skin before she lifted the axe off the ground and swung it at his torso. She dragged the writhing body of her husband to the stairs before she kick-chucked him down them. She lifted a phone to her ear and called the police. I stationed my drone in the backyard before the ambulance and patrol vehicles arrived. Since I had not recorded anything in that time, I did not see a reason to hand over anything as evidence. The most they could use in any form of formal investigation was flight data. I knew that would lead them to questioning me more than anything else. It would not have been as helpful to them as the scene they cordoned off and collected samples from. The tale was never reported on by any of our local news outlets. I live in an area where tourism is the #1 economic resource. Our officials did not want to scare people into thinking our little haven was anything but safe. I later heard through community gossip how the boyfriend wound up paralyzed. He did survive in the end. The husband died at the same hospital I work at from injuries sustained in the attack. The wife was later given an acquittal. The jury determined it was self-defense. The jury agreed she did not deserve that extreme of a reaction from her husband. When I open up and tell this story to a very small handful of friends, some of them ask me if I still use my drone. I find it odd they would think I would ever quit. One night of misfortune will not lead me to living in fear and stop myself from doing something I find quite fun. I still operated at the same hour past midnight after my shift, and I would not have it any other way. I still see the ghosts as well. Many of them circle my yard now and peer me over the fence. A few of them have not gone away. These hallucinations are there even when I leave in the evening. The sunlight shimmers off their translucent and wraith-like skin. I'm sure they will go away at some point. After all, they're not real, are they?
So I'm a 23-year-old female. I live in a townhouse with my 2 children, 2 and 6 months old. My fiance did live with us until 2 weeks ago. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and while he did live with us, my ex worked evenings. Sorry for the long post. Let me set the scene. We live in a tiny town in northern Pennsylvania. My line of townhouses sits in front of a big field that runs to a line of woods. As far as I'm aware, these woods stretch for at least a few miles, and I'm not aware of any houses in there or any roads that lead through them. My living room has 3 windows that look to the field, and my bedroom on the 2nd floor only has 1 window that faces that way as well. People do tend to walk their dogs back in the field, and kids sometimes play back there, but I rarely ever see anyone close to my house. For that reason, I tend to leave my blinds and curtains open, because I guess I just enjoy the view. So in July of 2019, I was laying in bed trying to fall asleep. All the lights were off, but I had my window and blinds open since it was so warm. I was looking out the window, and I noticed small red and white lights just outside. I got up and looked to realize that the lights were coming from a drone. I ran downstairs to where my fiance of the time was sitting in the living room and ran to the window. I told him what I saw, but of course when he went to look, it was gone. I was paranoid that the drone could have had a camera on it and someone was watching me with it. I kept my blinds closed for a while after that. Fast forward to January of this year. I guess I stupidly got comfortable and assumed that whoever it was flying the drone was a one-time creep. My blinds were open and I had just gotten out of the shower. I was sitting on my bed pretty much naked except for my underwear, scrolling on my phone when out of the corner of my eye I saw lights again out of the dark window. It was that damn drone again. I ran out of the room and waited for a few minutes. I peeked back into my room and it was gone. I quickly shut my blinds and got dressed. Honestly, I felt sick at how stupid I was to leave my window open again, especially when I was practically naked. Now for the really disturbing part. My 2-year-old son and I were out in the field 2 weeks ago, 3 days after I kicked out my boyfriend playing ball. I had my 6-month-old strapped to me in a baby carrier. Probably about a half hour after we had been out there, I heard a slight whirring noise coming behind us. I looked up and saw that damn drone flying towards us. I looked around and didn't see anyone. It stopped right over us. I freaked and grabbed my son and dragged him into the house, looking back at the tree line every so often as we went. I knew they had to be hiding in there. I went inside, closed the blinds, and called my mom and told her about the situation. She told me to just keep an eye out. I said I would. My son likes to line his toys up along the windowsill, so I figured it wouldn't hurt to open them up just an inch or so. A little while later, after we ate dinner and it was almost dark, I was feeding my 6-month-old and my son was playing. He was standing over by the window, lining up his toys. He started saying, "Dada, Dada." I assumed he was just missing his father and dismissed him by saying he was going to see him that weekend. He kept saying "Dada, Dada," though. I looked up and saw him pointing to the window, under the little gap the blinds didn't cover. I froze. I remembered that he calls any man with facial hair Dada because it reminds him of his father. But there was no way someone would be bold enough to actually come up to my window. Not when my neighbors are literally right there. Anyone could see them. But there aren't any lights back there, so unless someone actually stepped out of their house, I guess nobody would see them. Maybe it was my ex? but he should be at work at that time. I ran to the window and moved my son. I didn't want to lift the blinds, but honestly, I was sure it had to be the person who had been creeping on me for the past year, and I wanted to see who it was. I pushed the blinds up and was looking at a man who I definitely had never seen before, crouching in front of me. He was bald with a mustache and goatee. I have no idea how old he was. He could have been anywhere from 30 to 50. When he saw me, he smiled and stood up. I yelled and told him to f*** off and that I was calling the cops. He just stood there, smiling at me like some freak. I was about to close the blinds again when he said something I couldn't hear. I told him to leave again and he said, louder this time, "I just want to talk to you." I shook my head no and yelled the same thing to him. He started slapping his hands on the window, yelling, "No, no, no," over and over. I grabbed my phone, scared he was going to try and break in. I dialed 911. My kids were crying from the yelling and I felt on the verge of tears. I told the operator what was going on. The whole time I was on the phone, the man was pounding on my window, screaming now. He was yelling all kinds of nonsense, and I only caught some of it. He said he's been watching me for months. I'm beautiful. He wants me to come with him. He'll kill my children if I don't. The operator told me to go into an upstairs room and hide until the police arrive. My town doesn't have a police department, so we rely on the state police. She said it would be about 20 minutes, but to stay on the phone with her. The man was practically punching my window now and was just screaming like a maniac. I was about to grab my kids and run upstairs when I heard someone else screaming. The man bolted. I looked out and saw my neighbor and his girlfriend. I opened the window and my neighbor said that he heard the man, so he ran around the building. He said when the guy heard him, he ran back to the woods and disappeared in the tree line. They said they also called the police. I thanked them 100 times. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They did a quick search around the buildings and in the trees, but obviously didn't find anything. I've been super paranoid since then and stayed at my parents' a few nights after it happened. I don't know why that guy targeted me or why he waited so long to do something. I'm just happy my neighbors were there to intervene, or who knows what would have happened. So, to the creep who has been stalking me and my family for the last year, I genuinely hope we never, ever meet again.